morning. I'm Reverend Dr. Candy Ashenden, the pastor of the Athol Congregational Church, and I invite you to join us for worship this morning as we continue our series on Why Does the Church Exist? This morning we will explore the great outdoors and our call to care and be stewards of all creation.
The call to worship.
Let us remember what our God has done.
God created the world out of a formless void.
Let us remember what our God has done.
God made every animal and plant, bird and fish.
God has created us in God's own image.
Let us remember what our God has done.
God created people in the image of God.
Let us remember what our God has done.
God has made us caretakers of the earth.
Let us complete our task in faithfulness.
Eternal God, your spirit moved on the waters and there was light, your first creation. Your spirit moved on the water of our baptism and again there was light in our souls and hearts. Let your holy light shine on us today as we remember your creation and our special part in it. Amen.
Let's bow our heads and say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Presence of the Lord, the Holy One is here. Come bow before him now with reverence and fear. In him no sin is found. We stand on holy ground. Be still for the presence of the Lord, the Holy One is here.
But ask the animals what they think. Let them teach you. Let the birds tell you what's going on. Put your ear to the earth, learn the basics. Listen. The fish in the ocean will tell you their stories. Isn't it clear that they all know and agree that God is sovereign, that he holds all things in his hand, every living soul, yes, every breathing creature? If you look up stewardship in Webster's dictionary, you'll find this meaning. Stewardship is the responsibility of managing some assets or affairs or property that belongs to someone else. In simpler terms, stewardship is about management, so steward means manager. So what does it mean to say that we are called to be stewards of God's creation? Why do we say that one of the reasons we go to church is to learn to care for our world and for our environment? Well, to unpack this, first we need to agree to two basic truths. First, God created our world, and therefore creation and all that is in it belongs to God. Second, we are called to be stewards of this creation, this world of which we are caretakers and not owners. We're made to manage the resources that God put on earth, to rule over things and to take care of it. God's very first commandment involves stewardship of the earth, telling us that we were to rule over the creatures of our world. Standing here, just at the beginning of the Merrill Cave, the ice cave at the Lava Beds National Monument, it's easy to think about stewardship of our world. Look at the care that has been taken of this place. And on our way in, they even had us screened so that we will not carry the fungus to create the white-nosed bat syndrome to the creatures that live in this cave and make it their home. As we think about our call to rule over, to have dominion over, it's clear that this is what God was talking about preserving and caring for our earth, talking about stewardship of our land and our creatures. And as we think about that, we are called to be stewards, to manage our time wisely, because if we don't, we ourselves will also be unfulfilled. Standing here, deeper into the cave, you really feel like you're part of another aspect of creation. And how can we not want to care for our world, seeing all of this? However, before we get hung up on the language of dominion, let's think about creation. If God created the earth and everything in it, then all creatures are special. You, me, the little tiny goldfish, even the spider that might freak you out crawling around in the bathroom sink. The world God made in all its beauty and glory and splendor is here and everywhere around us. But what have we done to it? What impact has humanity had on this earth? How has human greed and selfishness, human desire for growth and development, impacted the delicate balance of nature that God has created? And why should we be bothered about the world God has made? Why should we be bothered about the beauty and the splendor of creation? Why should we be bothered about the environment and protecting the world? Why should we be bothered about the future of this world that God has given to us? Well, in my opinion, creation has been given to us as a sacred trust. We read in Genesis 1 that God said, "Let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over all the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." As human beings, God didn't create us to be equals with Him in creation, nor did He create us to be exploiters of creation. When God created human beings, God made us to rule over creation. It's important that we understand what that word rule might mean. We need to understand our own place within creation. We're not the same as the rest of creation. We're not the same. Human beings are not the same as the cows behind me, nor are we completely separate from them. We often think that human beings are unique having been formed by God, having received the breath of life from God. But the same words are used for animal lives as for humans. What is true is that humans alone bear the image of God, and therefore we have the consequences. Humans were created not to exploit creation, not to have dominion over it in an autocratic sense, but to have a responsibility. We have a responsibility under God to preserve and sustain creation while also enabling it to continue and develop. Creation belongs to God and has been given to us as a sacred trust to care for. That relationship between God and us, that call to care, puts a responsibility on each one of us to take the environment seriously. As we look at the forest behind me that has long since burned, we can see the damage, and we humans have a responsibility to learn about fire, to know when to control it and how to control it, to know when to allow nature to take its course and replenish and regrow on its own. So yes, we have a responsibility to care for God's world. I think there is a second component to being a good steward, and that is that we learn to recognize and celebrate God's presence in the world around us. Creation tells us of God's glory and love. Psalm 104 tells us that God lovingly provides the rains and the cyclings of water, providing food for creatures like these elephant seals behind me, filling people's hearts with joy, satisfying the earth. And how can we not revel in God's creation? How can we not see God's creation as a wonderful mystery that reveals different aspects of God? As I stand here on the side of Highway 1 in Northern California, and I listen to the waves crash against the rocks and watch as the spray flies into the air, how can I not feel the power of God? And as I think about all the creatures that I know live and breathe and swim below the surface of this vast ocean, as I consider the entire ecosystem that perpetuates life far below what I can see, how can I not be amazed at the ingenuity and the creative genius of our Creator? And as I stand near this waterfall and realize that the flow of water I see all around me comes from the melting of snow and the falling of rain, how can I not marvel at the way God created weather and a cycle of renewable resources? As I watch the waterfall and then the mist rise, knowing that right before me water is evaporating and being absorbed into the air, only to fall once again in a different form, how can I not see the hand of God in this creation? Or here, wandering in and among amazing works of art, brought to life by the mind and hands of Dale Chihuly, how can I not recognize the inspirational side of God and God's ability to inspire beauty in all of us? All around us, God's creation speaks. The majesty of the Rocky Mountains, the abundance of life-giving water in various forms, the eternal nature of the circle of life, as we observe plant life growing and blossoming, dropping seeds, dying away, new life sprouting up once again. The old giving forth to the new. In all of this, we see that God has set in motion a process to rebuild the soil which produces our food and sustains all of life. This rebuilding takes place unaided by human hands. It may take a century to produce 1/8 of an inch of topsoil, but in this way the land is nurtured, refreshed, and renewed. The whole earth was created to reuse substances contained in the soil, the water, and the air. And once we see God's wonders in the natural world, how can we not feel compelled to care for the world? God's resources are abundant, but not inexhaustible. God has created this earth in a way that we need to care for it. And if we look around us, standing here in the middle of the lava beds, imagining 12,000 years ago, volcanic eruptions in this area bursting forth and changing the landscape, and it looks like nothing, and yet someone thought that it was wise to preserve it, And it's wise for us to see not only the origins of this part of our earth, but it's wise for us to look at how even this has become a habitat for species, for bats, for all kinds of wildlife and flora and fauna that we could not imagine. But even this is a place we need to care for. The resources that we have in our earth are not inexhaustible, because if they were, we could simply take a bite out of an apple and throw it, always with no moral issue. But in fact, we are called to care for our earth, to reduce, to reuse, and to recycle. From the lava beds to Death Valley National Park, it is so clear that our world is so diverse, and yet it needs our care. We reuse and we recycle because God did not create a throwaway world. We reduce because the earth cannot endlessly absorb our man-made goods, our styrofoam, and our plastic. We recycle because God created a creation in an endless cycle of use and reuse. As people of faith, maybe it is helpful for us to use the theological term creation rather than environment. Why? Because it becomes for us an opportunity for witness. Creation speaks of a creator, and we are creatures that are responsible to our God. And it's also important that we broaden our understanding of the word stewardship. Inside the church, we think of stewardship as caring for our money. But outside the church in the world, stewardship has a broader meaning. And stewardship focuses on creation and caring for our earth. And that's important for us to recognize too, because that opens the door to witness. These words of God in Genesis, to have dominion, to rule, to take care of, when taken seriously, mean that we do indeed have the responsibility for caring for God's earth, not as an option, but as a divine command. When we live according to God's will, we find meaning, purpose, and joy in our life. Creation is a tremendous mystery. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." I doubt if we'll ever get to the heart of the great mystery that is creation, but I've always loved this story of creation. Whatever you believe about it, whether you believe that the world was created literally as it is set out in Genesis, or whether you see Genesis as a story or a poem, doesn't matter. There's a pattern to it. God said, "Let it be." God made it. God gave it a name. God saw that it was good. The story is full of great images, bright lights in the sky, great waters of the deep, plants and trees, swimming creatures of the deep, swarming creatures of the air, wild animals, and finally people, male and female, made in God's image and likeness, whatever that means. The whole creation, wonderful, mysterious, majestic, glorious, even down to the tiniest of animals and insects, birds and fish, was God's doing. So why do we go to church? To learn about who God is and how to care for creation. So as we gaze on creation, as we look at every part of it, let us experience the presence, the love, the beauty, the splendor, the glory of God. If God has chosen to reveal God's self to us through creation, then let us accept our responsibility to enable that beauty and splendor to continue. Amen.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them blossom for me and for you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed days, the dark sacred nights, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry, I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll never know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. And I think to myself, what a wonderful
As we go forth from this place, let us remember that we are called to be stewards of God's earth, and let us go forth and take care of God's earth. Go in the peace of Christ. Amen.